Hey, NorCal Carters. It is, I don't know what day it is, September 19th, and it's Monday, and we're on NorCal Mondays. And tonight we have a very special panel of karting officials. So if you have a question, you can chat live with us on YouTube, Facebook. But we have a panel of kart officials, so this should be a very interesting conversation tonight. And so without further ado, let's get into a couple quick highlights. Over the past couple of weeks, NorCal karting has been busy in general. There was a Track Magic Grand Rally at Prairie City. That was 2 weekends ago. This past weekend, Prairie City had their club race. They dodged the rain, so they were able to hold a race this past weekend. But coming up this week, we have Rock Sonoma race number 7. Again, Rock Sonoma race number 7. And we will be streaming live on YouTube under the Rock Sonoma channel. And then heading into October, we have NCK at Thunderhill East. That's the fall shootout. It's a Saturday, Sunday. So NCK at Thunderhill East. And a couple more weeks in advance. Let's see here. Oh, my computer's slower than me. Let's see. Prairie City. They have another event coming up October 8th and 9th. And then Rock Sonoma will wrap up their season on, let's see here, October 14th, 15th, and 16th with a doubleheader race weekend. So, without further ado, let's bring up Ashley.
Hey, NorCal. All right. So we have some shout outs for over the weekend. We had the Barnwells, Bowden and Brenly out at Spud Cup. Trenton Healy was out there with him too. If you guys are here, put it in the chat how you guys did so we can talk about it. USPKS, we had Christian Cameron representing NorCal, Mateo Calderon, Chase Hand. If you guys are here, again, put it in the chat. We want to hear how you guys did. Let's talk about NorCal Carter shirts. All right, so you can go to the NorCal Carter's online store to purchase your NorCal Carter shirt. We have the NorCal Army shirts. There's Hunter Gray, and we even have some long sleeves for the colder weather coming up. So go to NorCal Carter's store. Right there, there's the website, and get a shirt. I also have a promo code with Molecule. If you go to Molecule, you can use the promo code NorCal15 and you'll get a discount. We also have our Big Z Jerky discount as well. So there's our Molecule promo code. We'll get our Big Z Jerky website up here as well. And thank you to our supporters, Gorilla Barbecue. Let's get into our guests, Jason.
All right. So first up, let's introduce Darren Stahl. Darren, how are you doing this evening? Oh, hold on. I paused you. Okay, try again.
I'm doing pretty good. I appreciate you guys having me on the panel tonight.
All right, give everyone a little bit of an introduction, who you are, any local home tracks to you, and your karting experience and why you're on the official show.
So currently, I am a official up at Placerville Speedway and also a part-time flagman when my dad is not available there at Placerville. I also do some shows for the Sprint Car Challenge Tour as a flagman as well. History, my home track of all home tracks has been Prairie City. Started there in 1995, and when Linda Emick and Jerry Aarons were running the facility. I was actually fortunate to race there and also officiate there in different capacities, and did that up until about 2006, 2005. In the interim of that, I'd actually in 2004 and 2005, I kind of started chasing fender dreams, so to speak. And I'd actually been with the NASCAR Drive for Diversity program in 2004 and 2005, and it ran its course, and basically took some time off and went up to Placerville with my dad, and I've been up there ever since.
Very cool. Well, thank you for the introduction and joining us tonight. And then we'll circle back with you as we start getting into the discussion. But next up, we have Phil Hand. Phil, give yourself an introduction.
Hey, I'm Phil Hand, Audrey Hand's dad, Chase Hand's uncle. Some of you might know him. I'm the flag man out at Prairie City. I've kind of been dabbling a little bit with the SCUSA Pro Tour and stuff, flagging there, and then doing some marshal work for SCUSA also. I've been doing this for almost 22 years now. I started back, like Darren said, I started back Linda Emick and Jerry Aaron's time frame is when I started as a corner worker and kind of moved to grid, did flagging, and now I'm pretty much working the pro level too, in addition to all my club racing that I do also.
Very cool. Thank you for joining us tonight. And then we'll come back to you as well as we get the discussion rolling. And last but not least, we might have a couple more trickling in throughout the night. But as far as in the studio right now, our next, why is that not? Oh, okay. Hey, Josh is going to be you, and you need to unmute yourself. There we go.
Yeah. I just kept myself on mute because I kept talking. But,
okay.
Hey, NorCal. I'm Josh Bellos, as most of y'all know me. I've been around for a long time. I started, like most of y'all, in around the late 90s. I started racing around 97, 98 in Salinas. I raced pretty competitively in NorCal till about 2008. And then I left and I went to work for Bobby Orgel at PR1 Motorsports until 2012 or so. And then I kind of took a break from that and came back to go-karting, and I was Donald Durbin's right-hand man, for lack of better words, until 2016 or so. From about 2012 to 2016, I did everything with Donald. He was my best friend. He still is. We've always had a pretty good relationship. We did all the races, and now I am Bill McAllister's right-hand man at Rock Sonoma. I've taken the role as assistant race director this year at Rock Sonoma. I have a lot of experience, or decent amount of experience, racing, as well as coaching and mechanic and being at all the national races. So people have seen me around, and that's what I do.
And here you are. All right, let's bring it. Thank you for joining us, Josh. We're going to bring everybody up. All right. So again, thank you for joining us tonight. And I want to start it off. I have one question. And how do you guys know what to look for on the racetrack? Meaning, you might get 9 out of the 10 calls right, and you might miss that one. And it seems like that one junior dad is the loudest guy in the pits because you missed that one call. So as we'll go around the clock. We'll start with Darren, then we'll go to Josh, then we'll go to Phil. But when you're scanning the track, how do you determine, okay, this is where my attention is going to go? Darren, go for it.
Well, ever since I started officiating, it's always a deal of you're watching the first 30% of the field. You're watching the leaders, and you're watching, depending upon the size of your field, you're just watching that first 30%. And as far as when I was doing stuff with karting, you're watching that 30%. You're relying on some of the corner workers to kind of fill in the gaps when you can on anything else that happens further back. you're going to catch some stuff further in the back, and you want to make calls, to be consistent, if you see stuff in the back. But typically it's just that 30% of the field, and that's where everybody's kind of paying attention to. And, that's where, the money's on the line, points are on the line, and that's kind of, where you got to be at most of the time.
All right, Josh. What is your perspective on that?
I agree. It's impossible to pay attention to the whole field. When you have fields that are 25, 30 carts, 40 carts, 60 carts for whatever it's going to be, like a USPKS, it's impossible to pay attention to everything. Like, no one person is going to catch it all. So like Darren said, paying attention, you got to decide, where you are going to focus your time. And me personally, when I'm on the track, I rely a lot on what my corner workers tell me. I rely a lot on, relying on them. But like Darren said, I'm watching the first 30%, and I'm watching for somebody. The biggest thing I'm going to call is if you create contact with the driver and you gain an advantage on track, I'm going to call you for it. If you go in, you blast somebody off track and they go into somebody else, and that driver goes off track and you pass them both, hey man, you hit him into the other guy and you gained an advantage. I'm going to call that every time. Like, I'm mostly looking for contact that's gaining an advantage on track.
Got it. And then Phil, how about you?
I totally agree with all that. I've noticed doing the club racing and then the Pro Tour stuff. The Pro Tour stuff, you always you're only watching a certain portion and everything's on video. So there's a lot more eyes on the field, and you can always go back and look at stuff. And that's the pro stuff. At the club level, it's a lot harder. I got to rely on my corners, like Josh said. And then the race directors, usually watching the top 30%, like Darren was saying. I also been around this business long enough that I kind of got a clue of who I really need to watch sometimes, even if they have to come through the back of the pack. So I've always got an eye on those guys too, because
you want to give us some names?
A little crafty when they have to come through the pack. So I won't say any names, but I mean, there's a few, at least that many that I could name off.
How about card numbers
at all times?
Everybody's triple digits now, Jason.
I know, but everyone knows each other's cart number. So on that topic, Phil,
I can kind of answer that too, in a way.
Oh, go for it.
Okay, so a lot of people ask, like, timing and scoring, like, what do I really do? So actually what we're watching for is we have to watch the beginning. And then, so what I do is I count the carts, and then I visually score the end too. So not that what happens in the middle doesn't really matter, but I'm actually visually scoring the beginning and the end. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. A lot of the times it's just counting the carts too. So for me, it's different. I see numbers on a screen versus carts on the track.
One of the most important parts about racing, though, is your officiating.
Yeah, no, and I don't mean to interrupt or anything, but working with her directly this year as an official and her being the scorer, it's crazy how much we actually rely on scoring to relay in the top 3 to scales or whatever it be, and then after that fact, they'll be like, hey, myself or Bill McAllister, in my case, will be like, hey, one of us needs to go inform such and such driver that he's getting a penalty, but it's pretty crazy how much you actually rely on other aspects that you don't think, like the grid, the person lining up the grid, whether it be the person, doing the timing and scoring. Everybody has to be ready before we send a go-kart on track, whether it be the cart retrieval guy, not going on the track till the last card is off the track or the first card is on the track, whatever it be. There's so many different aspects that as a racer, that I didn't realize until I actually got my feet wet in the other side of it, as we call it, Phil. And it's so eye-opening to just realize how many more factors there are and how many more people are involved and steps and everything else that you don't realize as a mechanic or a racer when you think you're just overwhelmed and the day is going so fast. It's like, wow, so many people are involved in this.
Part race director and part aircraft or air controller.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's Ashley. Yeah. She's running the whole show pretty much when she's up in the tower.
Yeah, you're up there hoping that the hard drive doesn't crash.
Or the internet gods are on my side.
That's what Ashley's thinking because she doesn't want to have to hand score it. that's when it gets dirty.
So earlier Phil brought up the comment about the video with at the SCUSA Pro level, relying on all the other corner workers, but then plus the addition of video. I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this question. The way I wrote it down was, is video absolute? Meaning when you're watching a video replay, is that absolute, or have you guys have been swayed where you're watching a video from one perspective and then another video is brought in was like, oh, that's a completely unique perspective? Phil?
So from what I've noticed, the video situation at the SCUSA level, at the pro level, they've got very top-notch people in the race directing area, and they will review that video over and over again, and they can slow it down and look at the number, and they will make a very definitive call on the situation. They do need the marshals on, up in the towers and stuff, watching down below to kind of guide them into what corners to look at, but they can pull that stuff up. And I mean, it makes for a very good racing, I think, because people know they're being videoed. And so I think their racecraft is a little better. Come final lap, it kind of, racing's racing. I mean, you're going to be going for it final lap most of the time, or if you're coming through the back of the pack. But that video does make a big difference in the situation. Now at club level, when people start bringing their phones up and stuff like that, it's like, you can't really open that can of worms at a club level race. You can look at it and stuff, but most of the time the call's already been made, and it's club racing. I know a lot of people spend a lot of money doing it, but you've got guys out there it's not a pro level race. You got guys out there that are out there all day, probably didn't get a lunch break because rain or dust storm or something. You never know what's going to happen out there. So you've got guys out there that are trying to watch club level. I'm standing in the middle of the track. I love being in the middle of the track, and I always am looking all over the place. So my head's spinning around like crazy. And like Darren mentioned earlier, you're usually watching the front, but you start seeing a pack gather up. You got 3 or 4 carts starting to gather up, maybe mid-pack, back of the pack. You start watching that kind of stuff, because something's going to happen. Someone's going to get a little racy, and not necessarily always bad. Sometimes you're like, dude, I was waiting for something to happen, and that dude pulled that move off, and bravo. I love seeing that kind of stuff, especially with the kids. We've got a good group of kid carts, and we had a great bunch of Junior 1 pilots this weekend at Prairie City. And they all did an awesome job. And that's the kind of stuff that I really like, is watching them guys, watching the kids, and then growing up, driving bigger stuff now, racing at Laguna Seca, Sears Point, and all that kind of stuff. I enjoy watching that kind of the kids grow up into karting and with good racecraft. Some of the parents don't necessarily teach their kids that racecraft, and like I was mentioning earlier, some of those people I have to watch. So,
Hold on, Phil. You're jumping ahead to some
So
of our.
what give us
all
an
right.
example of a
Question.
parent they get to watch the kid on.
All right.
Okay,
Sorry,
hold
race
on,
control.
Jason. Hold on.
We gotta get Darren up.
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, from what I can see, on my side, back from when I was officiating at the karting level, I mean, a lot of stuff we had to really take into consideration. I mean, at that time, we were running on YBNs. We were running on, the initial adoption of some of the I think it was YHCs as well, which was the little firmer, more harder compound tire. So as the carts themselves, technology wise, were progressing, we had to make adjustments with a lot of what we were looking for in the rules interpretation and what we were looking for from the drivers themselves. I mean, a lot of things that we looked at was racecraft, huge amount of racecraft. And back to Phil's point, there's a lot of parents that have never been behind that wheel, and they're trying to, with the best intentions, trying to teach their kid what they believe is right. But oftentimes it's not the right direction for them as development for them down the road is concerned. But for us, being from the 90s, I mean, we were there where we went from 50-inch to 55 as far as widths were concerned. We were there from YBNs without dope to YBNs with dope, and we also went from the initial rollouts of we were running NorCal at that time was no nose cones, nothing up front. And then we started the adaptation of some of the European stuff. And then we also started the adaptation of some of the 4-cycle stuff. I believe it was called the old G-Man nose, which kind of migrated over from road racing. So, I mean, there's a lot of different things that went in to how we basically adjusted how we were going to call a race. And, going back from a club level, to IKF, the region series at that time, there was different ways that we called races because you had, the club race stuff is one level, and you step up and you run to the regional level, and it's a whole nother level of racecraft and kart control. And it just really, it took me a little bit of time, I'd say, when I first started doing everything. I was actually kind of lucky because at Prairie City at the time, we had the dirt track that was running across on the property just down the road from there, or down a couple hundred yards from the track. And so when we had outlaw carts and micros running there, you could see the different types of racecraft, and you were able to kind of take some of that to the next day at the local club race, and you really kind of got a sped up crash course. I mean, for me personally, it took me probably about 3 or 4 events to actually understand what they were looking for. And because we had Jerry was the promoter at that time, and he was also / race director. We also had a couple other guys that would step in from race director. It was kind of like a job that nobody ever really wanted to do because they always had to be the bad guy, and nobody wanted to be the bad guy. But it was a deal of you have just a lot of things to take into consideration when you're stepping out there, and making the calls for what's going on in front of you.
All right.
And at that time frame, there was no video back then either. As far as I know, video is pretty current now, and it makes a big difference. And I think it has raised the level of karting. I know Prairie City has video out there, but they don't utilize it as an officiating tool. So,
no, but he has a valid point when he talked about the difference of officiating between the regions that you're going to race, right? Because I mean, you're just as involved in national racing as you are in club racing, and you see the amount of, let's just say it, pushing and shoving that's happening at the national level. That's shouldn't essentially be happening at Prairie City, right? Like we're our job as officials, like Tommy Fogarty mentioned in one of the comments, is to instill these values with these kids at a young level, right? Our job as club officials is to instill these values, right? And then we have these more experienced, more, race savvy, I guess, race directors at the national level, like Darren said, that understand the difference of, what it's like to kind of be in those situations at a national level, or be in the pack racing, or be in momentum racing, and be able to make that judgment call of, no, man, you really just stuffed that guy. You didn't just throw it in there versus, it's a big difference of, like at the club level, it's like, no, dude, you made a mistake and you're going to pay the consequence. Like, you have to know the difference of what you can do and what you can't do as a young kid. And, if we can instill those values at young level and teach our kids at a young level, at the club level and at the regional level, when they go national racing, it's going to be better. It's going to be better for everybody across the board. And I truly believe that. And I hate to put it on the race officials, because it really is a crappy job, or a thankless job, and I've had people come back at me like, why are you penalizing me? Or why are you doing this? And come on, man, we're friends. And it's like, dude, just because we're friends, like, I hate to break it to you, I'm going to hold you to a higher level, because I know you know better. Like, unfortunately, the kids that I've coached, right? Like, everybody, I was the race official at Rockfest, and I hate to call them out, but everybody told me, they're like, oh, he's not going to penalize Mitchoff. He's not going to penalize Mitchoff. No, dude, I'm going to penalize you. I called it on the track. I'm going to penalize you every time. Why? Because I know you know better, right? I know you know better. I know you know the difference of what you're allowed to do and what you're not to do. Like, I hate to break it to you, buddy, but I know you know the difference, right? Like, I know what you're pushing the boundaries with and what you're not. Like, come on, man. We've been around this game long enough. And I feel it's our responsibility to hold these kids to a higher level, to a higher responsibility and higher values at the club level, and instill this stuff so that when they go regional and national racing and they get exposed to these situations where, yes, we are going to let more stuff slide. Like, I'm just as responsible at the regional level, and at Rock Sonoma, I let a little stuff slide because I've been there. I know what it's like to, have 6 guys on your bumper, or maybe defend a little bit, and the guy in second's kind of frustrated because you're defending. It's like, buddy, I mean, you got to choose when is the right time to defend. You can't start defending with 3 to go and stack everybody up and expect the guy in second to just ride. Like, that's not going to happen. Like, if you start stacking everybody up, it's time to go. Like, and there comes a time where we have to, as officials, we have to kind of see that stuff, and having little bits of race experience, I think, helps that. And to answer Jason's original question with the video, I mean, different videos and angles absolutely changed the way that I see things, because I had an instance for me twice at Rockfest where I was standing on the other side of the track, and I seen the incident happen in one way, in one angle, and I went and I got another angle from a driver who had protested my call that I had made on track, and I went and confiscated another driver's GoPro video, and I watched it to determine my final decision on what I determined that was a racing incident or not. Because originally, when I seen it from one angle, I was like, hey, man, that was kind of dirty. And then I seen it from 2 other angles, and I was like, man, unfortunately, that was just a racing incident. Like, these guys just ran out of racing room. And when you see stuff from different angles and how videos can help you interpret that, I mean, we're at the end of the day, we're human. We make mistakes. So if
it's no different than like the NFL. I mean, they have 800 cameras on one little play.
Instant replays, exactly.
Yeah, and on Tuesday morning, half the country's arguing about, their team getting shafted. It's like, well, I mean, if it's that close, do you really even make the call? Like, it's such a toss-up. And that's the NFL with $1 billion budget.
Yeah.
Um,
You're at a club race, you better don't make that move because you know you're going to get a judgment call. There ain't no video there, so you might as
Correct.
well just back off and bide your time and
well, that's
make
one
the
thing that
pass properly.
and I
That's
could be
where they
wrong
need to
about
create
this,
their
but it
etiquette,
seems like.
you know?
Oh, go ahead, Phil. Finish your comment.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I was done.
It just seems like over the years where when Darren was talking about no front nose cones and flat side panels, no rear bumper, it seemed like the racing when someone moved you out of the way, it was very tactful.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just crashing the guy, break his neck and move him out of the way. It was like, no, we're going to push you a little bit wide. We're going to take the turn. And I honestly can't ever recall a driver being screaming, yelling, upset when he was gracefully moved out of the way. Versus now, it's a little bit open, and boom, you get center punched.
Well,
I
There's
take
no
that
feel.
back, Jason. I disagree. I mean, I think drivers nowadays feel so entitled. I agree with you 100% that there is craft to moving somebody out of the way with finesse. Like,
Yeah,
if you come in and you're behind the guy in second and you just move them up and you can roll underneath them and the guy can even get you back in the same lap, dude, there's no, in my opinion, there is absolutely no reason to call a penalty. But nowadays, in my personal opinion, I don't want to open up a can of worms, but the series
that's what we
now
do on this show.
have opened themselves up for that. They penalized a kid. They took a kid's win away at Rock the Rio last year for an amazing move in turn one, just shoving the kid up, going underneath them, and the kid led 6 corners later. Like, I mean, and they still penalized him. They took away his win. It's like, what are we teaching these kids? Like, there is craft to moving somebody out of the way. Like, I hate to admit it, but there is.
Here's our buddy Barry chiming in. You can't use your competitor as a berm, traction, or brake, causing them to have to regain control of their cart.
No, but you can easily push somebody past their braking zone and roll right underneath them if they enter 2 carts narrow. I mean, I think that's 100% fair game.
Yeah,
I'm gonna call it like that every time. If you enter on the bottom of the racetrack and the guy goes to the bottom with you and he kind of shows you, if he doesn't have a gap and he initiate contact, if he's just on your bumper and then goes underneath you and shoves you up, hey man, that's part of defending. That's part of the deal.
Well, Darren, you had a comment.
Yeah, I mean, it's back in the mid '90s and in early 2000s when we were looking at things. I mean, and looking at it from a club race perspective, a lot of the things that we look for is if you're drafting a guy down the front chute, if you're hooked up and connected with them, are you giving him room when you get down to the braking zone, or are you driving him through the corner? Are you setting up the pass to where you're coming up underneath him on the exit? If you give him just a little bit of a touch and he goes a little bit wide, and there's that fine line, because there's a difference of if you push the guy wide a little bit and the rear end steps out just a tad and you get up underneath, that's good. But if you're blasting a guy and you're getting them half cocked sideways and crossed up with the steering wheel and you're getting by them, that's a whole different story. And from what I'm seeing now with the current body work, that feel that we used to have a little bit of being able to nudge up on a guy and just let him know you were there, it's almost non-existent right now, because you really have to kind of blast somebody, and it's just one of those things where it's with the way that the body work is now currently, even at the club level. I mean, it's a deal where you're probably making a call that you don't want to have to make, but because of where the carts are at now currently, and I'll be honest with you, Prairie City is a whole lot faster track with some of the improvements that have been made over there, recently, compared to where we used to have to, you have to get on the binders to get around a couple spots on the track. Before heading into turn one, you had to check up and use the curb in turn two to get through three. Now you're basically almost flat footing as soon as you get out of turn 1 through 2 and 3. And, it's kind of a deal. Then when you get down to turn 4, you're lined up on somebody's bumper and you're pushing them through that section where, a long time ago before, you had to respect turn 4 a whole lot or else you were going to be out in the trees. And
Donald's done a great job of cleaning up the trees, by the way.
But now it's like some of the dynamics of that track have adjusted a little bit. But my whole thing is we've always tried to preach. It's always give and take. Give your competitor a little bit, but don't take everything away from them. It's that thing of when we were running club races. As long as you're not driving the guy through the corner, if you're setting him up, you're setting him up. If you're nerf to nerf, you're nerf to nerf. But when you're getting, what we call the good old fashioned pit maneuver on somebody and you're doing that, we all know what it is. You're going to get called on it every single time. And from what I understand and from what I've seen a little bit here, oftentimes now with the way this body work is, that's what people are doing is just a good old fashioned pit maneuver. And, for me, my experience, that should be a call every time, and somebody should be either, getting set back a few spots or going all the way to the back of the back of the field at the end of the event. We see it in the big car stuff. Everybody likes, sprint cars with the slide jobs, slide jobs are slide jobs. In the world of dirt racing, they're expected. They're the thing. But at the same time, if you're giving a slide job to somebody and you're feeding them a tire, that's a whole different story. You're talking about somewhere, where, granted, I've seen guys get really hurt from karting. And, the same way, you're looking at it, in a big car. You're looking at a bad injury when you're allowing that type of aggressiveness to kind of fester and be kind of the standard and the norm. And not dial it back to where you're trying to instill racecraft from your younger drivers and your club members, because at the end of the day, you want people coming back to the club to come club racing. People aren't out there. That's where you also kind of have to put the promoter's hat on a little bit and not necessarily just the race official. Is you don't want to be known as Dump City. You don't want folks getting taken out all the time. And you want people coming back. You want the good club atmosphere, and you want all that to kind of be the thing that it is. That's for me, Prairie City was always been that when I was a kid, going through there, and from what I understand right now, it's it's getting back to that, but there's still some moments here and there. And from what I hear from some other facilities, there's some questionable stuff that goes on, and sometimes clubs are what I guess builds your numbers is how good you run your program, and how safe are you keeping your club members during the club events, with the type of calls that you're making on the track, especially with the younger drivers.
So let's open up a little bit of can of worms here.
All right.
Hold on. We also have Bill coming in too.
Uh-oh. Oh, geez.
Hello, everybody.
Talking about opening a can of worms. Here we go.
All right, hey,
Open
Bill.
a can of worms.
Hey, Bill,
Sorry,
hold on. I'm
took
going
so long
to
to
get
get in, guys, but I was a little busy.
Hey, can I go first, please? I go first, please.
Yeah, hold on, Josh. Hey, Bill, introduce yourself.
Bill Connor. I'm the grid guy at Prairie City, KPX, SCUSA.
Hey.
That's
Hey.
it? That's your introduction?
That's my introduction.
All right, so you're joining us as we're talking about some racecraft. And where is that limit? And the question, let's see here.
Right here.
Yeah. So the next question we have: you feel some of the aggression or the punting is because of the parents, the pressure parents put on kids?
Our parents, I tell you, they're the best.
Yeah, I honestly don't think it's necessarily directly related to parents.
Yeah.
Josh, we'll let you get in there, but I don't think it's directly related to parents. Parents are always going to be junior dads or soccer moms or whatever. I think it's their introduction into karting. And when you put kids in bumper cars and then you put them on a full-size outdoor racing track, the racecraft they learned is their buddies putting them in the wall at K1 or whatever indoor place. If you don't want us to mention your name, you can send us sponsorship dollars, and we won't associate you with crashing. But Josh, go ahead.
I definitely agree with you. I think it's a two-part question. I think a lot of parents have the responsibility of, or the pressure, they put the pressure on their kids of winning at all costs, and telling them that they got to go out there, and telling little Jimmy that he has to do whatever it is he has to do to win, and if this kid's doing it. But I think a lot of it is because they're having to spend so much money. Like, the cost of karting wasn't so much as it was when I was a kid. And when I was a kid, my dad we used to run YDSs. My dad used to buy like 3 sets of tires a year. And it was always like, all right, let's go have fun. Let's go make sure, like, my dad told me when I was go-karting, the day that it wasn't fun, that's the day we'll go bass fishing or we'll go tournament, doing something else. Like, when it's not fun anymore, then we won't go-kart. Like, that's it. And I was like, all right. And now I see a lot of kids who come in and they're crying because they got third. And I'm like,
they're crying because they got a penalty.
How is that fun? Because
that
your parents have so much pressure on you to do good, or, so-and-so's mom is screaming up and down the paddock because she just spent $4,500 on this motor and it's supposed to be the best one. And she thinks her kid's gonna fucking win. I'm sorry, he's not. Okay, like, if your kid can't hit an apex, I don't give a shit how much power you give him. It ain't gonna help. I'm sorry.
To add to your point a little earlier, I've heard that from other racers, parents and stuff, make the officials make the call. And that one kind of was like, oh, make the officials make the call. So now we have to make every call in order to make it right, especially at club level where we've only got a certain amount of eyes and most of them are tired because they didn't get a lunch break or something.
Well, and generally the parent that is complaining about their kid being taken out and they want us to watch them, you start watching and you see their kid doing exactly what they're complaining about.
Right?
It's truly what happens. I hear a lot of
it. Accurate.
I mean,
all right. So we have a lot of questions coming up. One,
there we go.
We're gonna talk about. Okay, so Barry Barnwell brought up this one. The IKF rule states that karting is a non-contact sport. Inadvertent contact may occur. If you push them off the line, you're in violation of the rule. Blocking is a different issue. Let's discuss. I did look it up, and it is solely the discretion of the race director.
That's correct. If they see it, if somebody sees it at a club level or even IKF, because they're not using video at IKF. Not that I know of, anyways. I've only used the video at SCUSA. So, I mean, you got to make sure you got corner workers or somebody, a race director that's watching everything to be able to make that call in the first place. I mean, like I said before, you got to watch the people that you need to watch. There's some people that could run in the front of the pack. I don't have to watch them, but I know that guy in the middle of the pack, he's going to be trying to come through pretty fast and hard. So I've got my eyes on him instead of the top two guys.
Do you have an example?
Driving just fine.
Right here, Jason. Right here. All right. This is the guy.
All right.
I built that reputation as a junior. I know what it's like to have the officials' eyes on you.
And then our friends.
Steve Pagot wants you to give them more rolled black flags. Apparently.
Yes.
Well, no, and that's what
where they at.
Is that right there? And I just want to kind of parlay into with or going one little step further with Phil on that. If you're not allowing some contact from time to time, like I said earlier, there is some give and take. Then all of a sudden you end up with people brake checking each other. And that's a whole nother can of worms that you don't even want to get into when that starts happening. So The moment you start telling people there is no contact at all, period, end of story, stop, but blocking is a different story, then you're literally gonna either injure somebody, or the racing part is just not going to be fun anymore. Because if you're getting calls on nudging up on somebody going down the front chute, or drafting down the front chute, and then you have to keep whatever 2-inch the 2-inch gap between that and the bumper. And then you got, especially with the younger drivers or drivers that aren't as adept with racecraft, all of a sudden you got guys checking up on the front stretch at 65 miles an hour because they don't want to get called on a penalty for running up on somebody's bumper. And then all of a sudden, we've had it in Prairie City where you got guys taking a tumble down the front chute. And and a lot of these racetracks, it's not fun when you see guys doing that. So, I mean, I agree, with when you're saying that there's absolutely no contact. I haven't been involved in a form of racing that hasn't had some amount of manageable contact. Because it's racing, it's hard to get away from it, because when you're trying to avoid from making contact, then all of a sudden you have other issues arise, like brake checking, like running people wide on corners. You open up a whole lot of other items that happen that can be unmanageable.
It's a very
there's
fine
contact,
line.
and then there's contact.
I want to add
wanna
to
hear
this
what
so
Josh
bad.
has
I
to
don't
say.
mean to interrupt anybody, but I think
Like
that's
a timer
what
alert here.
that's what added the pushback bumper. I really believe is the fact that officials like you were in that situation where they were like, we can't call, contact, but we can't call a pushback, right? Like we can't call a brake check. So they just brought in the pushback, right? So we brought in the pushback, and now they're still making contact calls where guys get moved out of the way, and they're like, oh, you moved him. Well, he didn't have a pushback. How do you call him for contact and moving the guy out of the way if he didn't push his bumper back in?
Because they practiced that. Duh.
Hey, but that
Practice
brings
on
us
push
back
out.
to the question earlier of craft, right? Like there has to be a little bit of, like Darren said, a little bit of give and take. There has to be a little, like he said, you can't just go in and root somebody out of the way because they went to the bottom. I definitely agree. That's going to be a penalty every time. But there has to be a little bit of craft to it. And if you go in and you knock somebody out of the way and you push your bumper back, well, buddy, guess what? You're going to learn not to do it so hard next time. But if you can get and practice to the point where you can finessely move somebody up out of the way without pushing back your bumper, that's part of the craft.
And I've seen some greats do it. I mean, when I was officiating at Prairie City and doing some racing, we had, Joey Hand, David Mayhew, the Speed family, Tofi Stewart, John Baldazar. You had
all legends of the sport.
You had a ton of guys. You had what the heck also Joey Whitson. So you had a lot of guys with a ton of racecraft, that were there. And a lot of those guys, they figured out a way to get around somebody without dumping them off the track. And from what I'm hearing that happens at the national level in some areas is, there's a lot less racecraft and there's more dumping that goes on from time to time. And that's the one thing I think it's needs to be kind of marshaled back in with some other facilities, is teaching those drivers racecraft. I mean, one of the things that we did way back when Jerry was running Prairie City, is we actually had a separate parents meeting for kid kart racers and the junior drivers, because we wanted to set the table for the parents of the expectations that we were looking at. We didn't want the excessive pushing and shoving. And like Phil said, let the officials make the call. That's not something that you should be teaching a younger driver when you're trying to teach them that racecraft that's needed, especially if they want to move up and they want to move up into a next level, past karting, even past, either USPKS or whatever the other national series are. I mean, oftentimes guys are skipping or going from there and they're going up to big cars. And so a lot of that stuff that you want to try and teach them is, that transition for them to move on, to not be a punter, not to be somebody driving through people, because at that point, those mistakes get real expensive. There's a difference between, a couple $100 off, or maybe totaling a chassis, or a couple $100 of, odds and ends, tie rods and stuff like that. But, I've taken the front end off a couple race cars, and it's $5,000-$6,000 to fix everything. It's a deal where you have to, racecraft is going to save your ass, and it's going to save you some money down the road when you're doing it.
So that's kind of a good segue into one of our questions that we had also. Let's talk about kids moving up to seniors sooner than they need to. Go ahead.
I don't think it's a matter of them moving up when they need to. I mean, it's a lot of the kids, you can tell when they're ready to move up. I mean, you could watch them drive, and they got the racecraft. They've got a coach teaching them how to drive. And those kind of kids, they can move up. But there's some kids that get moved up just because of the age, and they don't necessarily have the racecraft. So, I mean, you're still always going to have, at least at club level and even the regional stuff at KPX, you still have those X drivers that may have just moved up into that class, but they weren't doing too hot in the class before either. But because of their age group, they moved up. And so now they're kind of in a different element, but still in the same position. And there's always going to be people in the back. I mean, there's only one winner. So there's always going to be people behind the scenes. And some of those races in the back of the pack are better than the front. But those kids moving up, it's a very transitional stage. I mean, especially if they're changing horsepower also. I mean, moving up from a junior 1 to a junior 2, Briggs and Stratton 206, it's going to be a little different than moving up into like a junior 2 into a KA or something. The whole driving aspect and braking points and all that kind of stuff are totally different. So I think when you're moving up, you need to kind of stay in the same power range that you were in until you get comfortable where you're at, and then possibly move into a higher horsepower aspect of it. But I think people think that if you're moving up, you got to go faster. You got to go faster when you move up, I think.
And I also think it depends on the not the maturity of each kid, because that's too wide open, but from one class to another. Like when kids are going from like micro mini into junior, the juniors are bigger, stronger, more aggressive. And then some of those kids going from junior, if you have an aggressive junior going into senior, one of the problems I see, it's like, okay, well, mom and dad say, well, that's a junior kid on the track, right? That's my little kid. But now they're racing with adults. And it seems to be like the adult classes are a little more self-regulating. If you're going to be a very aggressive junior driver, then you better have the understanding that the adult class might self-regulate.
And the parents got to understand that too.
Yes.
With that?
I'd say the parents have got to understand that
Yeah.
too. If they want to take that gamble, then that's that next level of maturity. I mean, again, being as long as I've been on the big car side now, I mean, we got 14-year-olds jumping into 360s and 410 sprint cars, and it's a different story now, because now you're messing with grown men, and when you're making kid mistakes, or you're doing things that's cost be honest with you, I mean, when you cost somebody $15,000 to $20,000 in a race car, and you're 14-year-old kid making a 14-year-old aggressive move, it's that awareness that, hey, you're going to be treated differently. You're not just the little kid out there. You're mixing it up with the grown adults.
You're an adult. Yeah,
And,
on the track, you're an adult.
Mom and dad have also got to be paying attention to that. As long as you're not putting your hands on a kid or doing something like that, but if you're telling them, if you're being again, and it's also an adult about it as well, when you're addressing a younger driver, you're addressing it as an adult, and not, trying to start a fist fight with somebody, or trying to start a fist fight with mom and dad. You're addressing them, you're letting them know what's going on, And it wouldn't even hurt if you pull somebody from the scales to be a part of the conversation and let them know what's going on, and you move on. But for parents, and I've seen it a lot, where the parents are defending the kid and outright, just because he's a kid, doesn't matter if he was wrong or right, they're defending him no matter what. My kid, doesn't do any wrong, whatever. That's what you have to, that's that self-evaluation of when you move on and you're moving up from that junior rank and you're moving up right up with the adults.
Yeah, we had a couple of comments earlier from Donald, whose handle is Prairie City Karting, and Steve Kemp. Both have really kind of said the same thing, where it's the track or the race director, and in this, we're going to merge the two together because the track hires a race director. They set the tone of the event, and I know when Donald's at the beginning of his event, he's very, hey, it's things are going to get flared up. Let's all be friends at the scales. Let's leave here with a good experience. And he sets that tone in the morning. So I think that's important that multiple people have said that in the comments, like, hey, the track is setting the tone on what they expect.
Yeah, and let's all be honest here. We all agree, we're all in agreement here that this is not a sport where we want to go just root the guy out of the way. Like, no. This is a no contact sport, and we are teaching our drivers to not to do the passing and the racecraft and everything else and the patience. But
we've also all been on the fence.
But we also understand that there is a finesse to it too. There is a craft to racing, and we have to accept that. Like, whether it be right or wrong, like, we have to accept the fact that there is a craft to this racing.
Well, and then on the flip side too, outside of the contact, just slightly, gently move somebody out of the way. What about the racecraft by the guy in front that knows he's about to get moved out of the way, checks up or changes his line a little bit and does a beautiful crossover? It's like that's part of it. Like, no contact made. He knew it was coming, or she knew it was coming, and then you just see that beautiful crossover pass, and it's like that's racing.
Yep.
I love seeing that kind of stuff. And Donald said it before. These carts are weapons. I mean, and when you start seeing somebody use the cart in an aggressive manner, you're going to get called out. And I've seen a lot of people just do a little push, and the guy goes out a little bit, comes back in, and like Jason was saying, you got the crossover move. I mean, they didn't completely take him out, just kind of bumped him out of the way a little bit. No pushback. It wasn't super aggressive, and they bumped out. They probably knew it was coming and got back in, did the crossover move, or even got him coming back down the straightaway the next lap or something. They just kind of tucked back in, and that's the part of the racecraft about, not taking somebody out, but you got to have the racecraft to know what's coming up behind you. Also, you got to, if you're good, you're going to know what's coming up behind you and basically have eyes in the back of your head and know what to anticipate.
Yeah, I can't remember the race, but it was Kart Chaser, and it was one of their broadcasts, and it was in the shifter class, and I want to say it was Kremers and maybe French, and one of them was in front of the other, and I might have the drivers wrong, but the guy in front knew he was just about to get moved out of the way, not slammed into, but just pushed a little bit past the braking zone. Still, he's only going to lose one spot. He knew it was coming, completely changed his line, got on the gas a lot earlier, shot underneath the other guy because the other guy was expecting to be able to push, screwed kind of his momentum up and his chassis balance. And on video, it was like, that was just a beautiful sequence.
Yeah.
You knew what was coming, and that makes a big difference. That's part of racecraft also. Not only pushing somebody out, but knowing that you might get pushed yourself. So anticipate that, especially if you're running in front of the pack.
All right, so are there certain classes that are higher offenders?
Hold on.
Time
out. All right.
Yeah, the kid carts, they're the worst.
Final thoughts, shout outs, and which classes are your highest offenders?
And drivers.
Masters.
Okay, hold on. While you're thinking, we have a new driver here.
Think about it.
Walter Vargas would like to try Prairie City. What day would be best to go out there? Walter, call Donald at Prairie City. Tell him NorCal Carter sent you, and he will be able to answer. Donald, maybe if you're on, you can answer as well.
Walter, go out on the weekend. Any go-karter out there will help you.
Go out on the weekend.
Community. If you go out there on the weekend, any go-karter will help you. It doesn't matter.
Tell
if
him
it's
NorCal Carter
myself,
sent you.
Phil. If you have questions, somebody will be out there on the weekend, whether it be Saturday or Sunday, and somebody will help you. It doesn't matter.
Donald will bend over backwards for you.
Yes, it doesn't matter what it is.
Thursday
Walter.
is the
Go
best
out there
day to
on
go
a
out there.
weekend. Somebody
Thursday.
will be there. Somebody will help you all the time.
All
I
right.
prefer Wednesdays myself, but
Just tell him NorCal Carter sent you. All right, guys. Last 3 questions. Final thoughts, shout outs. What classes have the highest offenders? Here we go. We'll start. Who do you want to start with? Who wants to
let's
start?
start with Bill. I haven't heard from him in a minute.
Yeah, Bill. What's
I'd
up,
have
Bill?
to say it's the Masters and the 206.
Hey,
Definitely
don't talk about my
Masters.
206.
When you say masters, are you talking about those 30-year-old heavyweight kids that should be in senior?
Well, it's
That
the
Masters
between the
class?
Masters and the Grandmasters.
Oh, okay.
They definitely beat each other up. You would think by their age they would learn the racecraft.
Yeah.
Hell, by that age,
my
most of their nerve endings are already kind of worn away, so that's why they can't feel anything.
For sure.
That's why we got to cut the laps back for him.
All
right, Josh.
Bill.
All right, I'm up.
Give us your
All right.
shout out and then the highest offending classes.
All right, I definitely think my highest offending class has got to be Senior 100 in Sonoma. Like, you guys are just wilding out every race. It's ridiculous. And then my shout outs, I got to shout out my team, Gary Haney, for driving across the country right now with all of our equipment. You know, the real MVP. He's just hiking it through New Mexico right now with all of our gear. Myself, Tyler Agan, the Healy's, the Barnwells, Dickman, Gary Haney, Danny Rubino, Zach, I don't know his last name. We're all going out to CKNA to hold it down for the home turf at the Nationals. So we'll be out there for 2 weeks trying to hold it down for the home team. So shout out to all my guys. Hopefully we do good. Peace.
All right.
Thank you, Josh.
All right. Next, Darren.
I don't know who to shout out, but I've been out of the seat for a long time. But if I will say this, if any facilities or venues are needing an extra hand at any time or need some assistance as a co-director or something like that, I'm always available if it doesn't interfere with my big car schedule. I definitely wouldn't mind giving back to the sport that really kind of helped me and have a lot of fun and do a lot of cool stuff that normal people don't get to do. So I'd like to thank Jason for putting this thing together and doing what he does. And
This one was all Ashley.
and I will say this.
Great job.
I will say this. Send a shout out to Bob Erickson, the Track Magic ownership group. If there's some folks out there that have been away from the sport for a while and just want to go out and have some fun, that's a hell of a group to get with. And, that's pretty much about it.
Perfect.
All right.
Darren,
Thanks for hanging out, Darren.
All right, Bill. Worst offending class.
He already said his. It's my turn.
I said mine.
Yeah, but he's like doing photos of the roof and the ceiling.
I told you. Anyways, I'm going to go. I like to say
I was leaving.
probably the KA 100s and the 206 seniors. The senior guys just go balls to the wall too much sometimes. There's a lot of them out there, so they have to turn up the aggression a little bit, and I understand that. And most of the time they're pretty good, but there's a few offenders out there. I love the juniors are the best. They always try to keep things clean for the most part, but I have to say KA seniors and 206 seniors are usually some of my biggest culprits in having to make a call. And then I'd also like to shout out to all my track workers, scorekeepers, grid guy, the announcer,
Go.
all the corner workers that are helping me out, make calls and stuff. So, and then also Tourette syndrome awareness.
All right. Thanks, Phil. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see ya.
All right. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Phil.
Bye, Bill.
Oh, did you get it? Oh, you got rid of Bill.
Well, he left.
All right, after your worst offending class.
My worst offending class. Whatever class Rich Sandoval's in, because I guarantee you he wrote his kids' transponders numbers wrong, or the cart numbers.
The cart numbers are wrong on the side of the cart. Yeah.
Yep. All right. So let's talk about open calls, shows we have coming up. So we are going to be doing another open what did we call it? Open mic night coming up. We're going to do a safety gear show. We're going to be doing all of our clubs are going to be doing their postseason. So NCK, Sonoma, Prairie City, all that. We're getting them all on the calendar. And yeah, so we got Sonoma coming up. If you want to be on my show, let's do it. Buy a t-shirt, join the NorCal Army. Peace, NorCal.
All right, and that was our show tonight for the Officials of NorCal. And to put my 2 cents in, I am going to disagree with Josh, and he can't come back on and argue. I don't think it's the KA100 that's the worst. I think it's KPX Senior Briggs from my experience. I haven't replaced more rear bumpers or side pods than that class. And I think the 100cc senior stuff is some of the actual best racing, actually. So besides shifter, and I can block everybody now and not bring anybody on, but it's shifter. So with that being said, shifter is the best class from race craft. They're self-regulating. They have the front brakes. It's great. Let's see. We have one last comment coming in. Steve, we'll get you back on another show. So we'll be able to cover you in. Maybe you can be a race report for Blue Max or something, or Northern Nevada Kart Club, but we will get you back on. And with that being said, join us, Rock Sonoma, this weekend, live stream on YouTube. And just remember, if we all get one person in the sport, by next year we'll double.